Hi everyone, welcome to week 4. So I'm going to be walking you through the essay since that's going to be the main focus of this week. So before we do that, I want to go back to week 3 since obviously these are connected. So on the prompt for week 3, there are 3 main questions, which is what is the speech and who made it? What is the historical significance of each of the speakers? And what is the impact that has been made on society because of the speech? So last week, obviously, you had to look at all 3 of those questions for both of the texts. This week, instead of just giving us the information, you're going to be having to make an argument about these speeches. And so if you look at the prompt, it wants you to make a thesis that looks at which one is more effectively using rhetoric. Okay? And so in that, what I would do is kind of turn this into a compare and contrast essay where you would list which speech is better in your thesis and why. So they might use emotion more effectively, pathos. They might establish credibility more effectively, going back to ethos because of the sources they use or whatever the case may be. And so you could still use those 3 questions from last week, but now instead of just saying, okay, this is who gave the speech, this is the historical significance of it, just kind of a book report, now you're going to be kind of comparing and saying, okay, well, in this one, it had blank historical effect, so like look at I Have a Dream, compare that to one of the other speeches that you looked at. I'm pretty sure that one would be more historically significant than a lot of those speeches on there. Gettysburg Address or something. Any one of these speeches that you might have looked at, you can kind of think about comparing them now for week 4, seeing which one is more effective. I would even use those 3 questions to turn them into paragraphs. So for instance, you might have a paragraph about the historical significance about each of the speeches, and then as you're going through it, talking about, instead of just what was the historical significance, which one was more effective this time. So again, your topic sentence might say something like, because its historical impact was blank, speech A is more impactful than speech B. So yeah, now instead of just being kind of a book report, meaning that it's just a summary of these speeches, now we're turning it into an argument where you're saying, okay, this speech is more effective and these are the reasons why it's more effective. So again, rhetoric is at the forefront of what we're doing in terms of these speeches. And so that's something obviously that should shape the reasons why you think one is more effective than the other. Other than that, the only thing I would just say about both the papers from week 3 and 4 that we got to kind of look at is the research itself. I want to avoid just sort of Googling these things because we can get some pretty dubious websites. Some of the websites that I found that people used, when you go to them, they don't look all too scholarly or maybe that credible or trustworthy. So you gotta make sure that you're using things that you can make sure your ethos or credibility builds it up rather than, destroying it. On that note, I wanted to remind you, if you're in the class, you should see the library portal up into the right corner. I would suggest starting there. And so if we go to the library, there's a lot of good databases. I like EBSCOhost, and when you click on it under School of Arts and Sciences, it's the first one that pops up. It can be a little unwieldy in terms of, it has a lot. So just make sure that you want to narrow it down with your search terms. I might even click the scholarly button when you do the searches so that everything you're getting is scholarly. But other than that, I would treat this as your first go-to place, and then if you really can't find anything else and we maybe burn through our resources together, then just trying straight Google to find sources. It seems like the opposite was happening last week, where people would go straight to Google and maybe didn't spend as much time in the library, our virtual library, trying to find sources. So this is something that if I mentioned it specifically in your paper, either in the end notes or throughout, I would highly recommend changing some of your sources because, like we talked about in week 3, that the whole point of these sources is to build your credibility. And if you're using websites that are not quite credible and we don't know who wrote them, and just there's not a lot kind of backing up the credibility of that particular site, it can be seen as not so credible. So you want to keep that in mind. All right, so just to kind of wrap up, research paper this week is going to be due, building off of week 3. I would use most of your week 3 paper to, like I said, turn it into a compare and contrast essay. The questions that were on week 3, you can maybe make those paragraphs where you compare and contrast things like the historical significance to prove why one is more effective than the other. And and the other thing is, too, like I said about the research, make sure that you're using our library, not just Googling things. So other than that, I think that's all I really had to kind of cover. So if there's any questions or comments, obviously you could always email me or get me in the class. If you want me to take a look at your research paper, please do so by Friday. The best way for us to go over it actually would be during office hours, so that we could do it using Collaborate, where we could have like a sort of a live conversation about your paper. Okay. Other than that, have a great week, and I'll talk to you all later. Bye.